Hi everyone, and welcome to the Illustrator's Pen Tool Guide. Now if you're using Adobe Illustrator, then it's almost certain that you use the pen tool when creating your paths. This guide aims to introduce or remind you of these features, shortcuts and methods for working with what's arguably Adobe's most essential tool. To begin, let's take a look at the different functions of the pen tool, which can be found over to the left on the toolbar here. So just click and hold the mouse button over the pen tool icon here to view the different options. So the first option here is the pen tool, which is the standard pen tool that we'll be using. And then underneath we have the add anchor point tool. Then underneath that we have the delete anchor point tool. And then lastly, at the bottom here, we have the anchor point tool. Now let's go through each of these and how to use them and their functions. So let's go through the functions of the pen tool first. Now to illustrate this, we're going to use the pen tool, which is P on the keyboard, and we're going to use a stroke of 2 pixels. Now to use the pen tool, of course, you just click on the artboard here to create a point, and then click again to create a point to join, a line to join these points together. Now, you can also click on a point, hold Shift on the keyboard to create a line which snaps to an angle of 45 or 90 degrees. So you can also do that. And also, if we click and drag a point here, like so, we can create these Bezier curves. So we can create a curved line, like so. Cool. Now we can also click on a path segment to add anchor points as well. So if we click and hold on the pen tool here, and we use the add anchor point tool here, we can also add a point anywhere on our path, like this. So if we zoom in here, you can now see with our direct selection tool that we've added these extra points to our line, like so, simply using the add anchor point tool. So you can add anchor points anywhere on our line, like so. And the next tool we're going to look at is the delete anchor point tool here. So you can see all these anchor points that we've created. If we just click on them, we can delete them using the delete anchor point tool, like so. Now the next tool we're going to look at is the convert anchor point tool. So let's click on this anchor point tool here, or Shift C on the keyboard. And if we go over to this anchor point here in the middle here, you can simply click and drag on it to create Bezier handles where there were none, like so. Excellent. And then just simply use the direct selection tool here to sort of adjust the anchor point and the handles as you see fit. Awesome. Now another way that we can use this tool is if we click between 2 anchor points, like so. We can also use this to manipulate this line as a curve. Now, not part of the pen tool group here, but definitely associated with it, we can take a look at the scissors tool here, which is C on the keyboard, and clicking anywhere on our path here, we can use this to divide our line into 2, like so. So now we've got 2 paths thanks to our scissors tool, and we can do the same again. So clicking on our path, you can see now that we can separate it. Awesome. Now let's go through our keyboard shortcuts for our pen tool. So P on the keyboard selects our standard pen tool, which you can use to create these lines, like so. And then to add anchor points, we can press the plus sign on our keyboard to add anchor points anywhere to our path, making sure that we actually click on our path, otherwise we'll get an error, like so. And minus button on our keyboard is the delete anchor point tool, so we can use this to delete our anchor points, like so. And then to convert an anchor point, we press Shift C on the keyboard, and this will enable us to convert our anchor points so that we can get these nice Bezier handles that we can then manipulate with A on the keyboard, which is our direct selection tool. And now we can manipulate our anchor points and handles like so. And then the scissor tool is C on the keyboard, and we can use this to click on our path, and then we can separate our paths like so. Now the last thing that we're going to look at is joining these two paths together. So using the direct selection tool, let's go ahead and select these two anchor points, and then pressing Ctrl J on the keyboard will now join those two paths together like so. Awesome! So let's review the tools that we've just viewed and their shortcuts. So P is for the pen tool. The plus sign is for the Add Anchor Point tool. The minus sign is for the Delete Anchor Point tool. Shift C is for the Convert Anchor Point tool. C is for the Scissors tool. And Ctrl J is to join two anchor points together. Now we're going to turn our attention to the cursor of our pen tool. Now the pen tool takes on different forms depending on what you're doing and when you're using it. So each cursor intuitively makes you aware of the action that you're about to perform. So now you can see that the pen tool takes on this pen-shaped cursor, which shows you that it's prepared to begin a path. You can then change the look of this by pressing caps lock on your keyboard, which changes it to this sort of X shape, which some people might find more useful and more accurate, like so. Excellent. Now, midway through creating or editing your path, you'll see that there's this grey box next to your cursor, which shows you the amount of pixels in between your first point and your cursor. Now, when the mouse button is pressed, the cursor will turn into this black arrow, which will enable you to draw these handles for your curved lines, like so. And then if we move on to the other tools, if we press plus on the keyboard, you'll see that there's this small plus sign on the bottom right of your cursor, which shows you you're ready to add an anchor point. And it's the same with the minus button on the keyboard, which shows you that you're ready to remove an anchor point from a path. Now let's go ahead and go into the secondary mouse controls with the path selected. So let's create a quick path here, like so. Now, if we go ahead and hover over an anchor point, you'll see that we can delete an anchor point. If we hover over a path segment, we can add anchor points, like so. And then if we use the pen tool to hover over the end segment here, we can use this to continue our anchor point tool, like so. Cool. Now let's go through some keyboard controls. So using the pen tool again, hold shift as I showed you before to constrain the movements of our pen tool to 45 and 90-degree angles whilst creating other anchor points, like so. Cool. Now we can also select an anchor point with the direct selection tool, which is A on our keyboard, and then click delete, and the anchor and adjoining path segments will be deleted, leaving two paths, like so. Now with the pen tool selected, if we press and hold Alt on the keyboard, you'll see that the cursor changes into a convert anchor point tool. So just holding Alt, we can now use it like so. Excellent. Again, with the pen tool, if we go ahead and hover over these handles here and press Control on the keyboard, we can now manipulate the handles like so. And then if we press and hold Alt whilst creating these curves, so let's go ahead and press and hold Alt whilst creating, so clicking and dragging, we can now go ahead and split the curve like so. So press and hold Alt, we can split the curve. Press and hold Alt, we can split the curve. Cool. So that unhinges the handles. The next thing we want to do is if we go ahead and use the scissors tool here, or C on the keyboard, and if we go ahead and press Alt on our keyboard, you'll see that the cursor actually changes into an Add Anchor Point tool. So this will be useful whilst splitting the paths. If we want to go ahead and add some paths afterwards, just go ahead and press Alt on the keyboard, like so. Now, with the Add Anchor Point tool selected, if we press Alt on the keyboard, that will change it to a minus anchor point. So that will delete anchor points, like so. And then if we have the Delete Anchor Point tool here, if we hold Alt on the keyboard, that will change it into a plus anchor point tool, like so. Excellent. So now let's go ahead and go into some of the preferences which you might find useful when using the pen tool. So to do this, go to Edit, Preferences, and Selection and Anchor Display. And one of the first things that we want to take a look at is the tolerance, which is the radius of the selection area around our anchor points. You need to choose a value between 1 and 8. 1 being if you want to be really accurate when selecting your anchor points, and 8 if you prefer less precision. So let's keep this at 1 for now. The next thing that you want to look at is the object selection by path only. Now, if we don't have this selected, you'll see that if I create a circle with a fill, so let's go ahead and fill this with a color just to demonstrate what we're going to be doing. If we want to select this, we can select it in the center of our circle here, like so. However, if we only want to select shapes using the path, go ahead and check this, and you'll see that we can't select our shape in the middle anymore. We have to select the path in order to move it. Excellent. Now, the next thing that we want to look at here in the preferences is the snap to point. Now this will enable us to snap any sort of shape that we have. So let's go ahead and create 2 rectangle tools to the anchor points. So if we want to move this shape here close to the anchor point of this shape, you'll see that it snaps to the point straight away, like so, which is useful if you want to align 2 objects together. Now the next one that we want to have a look at, if we go back to the preferences here, is the handle style. So if we go ahead and click on the different handle styles here, you'll see that one style is with the circle filled in and the other style is with the circle filled out. So that's for your display preference. And then the next one is highlight anchors on mouse over. So when checked, this means that the anchor points are highlighted whenever you mouse over them with a cursor. So you'll see if we use the direct selection tool, as we mouse over this path here, you'll see that the anchor points are highlighted whenever we go over them. And if we have this deselected, so if we deselect this, even if we mouse over the anchor points, we can't see them. So let's go ahead and put this back. Now the next thing we want to look at is the show handles when multiple anchors are selected. So if we keep this unchecked here for now, you'll see that when we select multiple anchors by holding Shift on the keyboard, the handles disappear. So we can't see the handles. However, if we go to our preferences and check this option, you'll see now by selecting 2 anchor points, the handles are still appearing even though both of them are selected. Cool. Now let's go back into preferences again, and the next thing we want to look at is the hide corner widget. Now you'll see if we go over to our square shapes here, you'll see that we've got this nice little corner widget which we can use to curve our corners. Now if we go to preferences, we can actually hide the corner widget here depending on the angle of the corner. Okay, so the next thing we want to have a look at is enable the rubber band. So when we want to lay down an anchor point, so let's go ahead and use the pen tool here, you'll see that we've got this nice looking blue line here, which will show us what our path will look like. Now, checking this rubber band option will give you a preview of the path that you want to commit. So if we take away these here, you'll see now that you can't actually see the rubber band as we are about to click our next anchor point. Whereas if we go back to our preferences and check these back here, you'll see now that the blue line has appeared again. So we can see what we're going to draw out. Excellent. And the next thing we're going to have a look at are other shortcuts and tips. So the first tip we're going to have a look at is using the control button on our keyboard. So if we select the direct selection tool first and then select the pen tool, you'll see if you look at the cursor here, if we press and hold the control button on our keyboard, it now turns into the direct selection tool. So this will be useful, say if we are creating a shape and we want to manipulate one of our anchor points, you just have to simply press and hold the control button on our keyboard without having to change our tool, like so. Cool. So that's something which is useful. Now with a path selected, so let's go ahead and select a path here. You can also use the spacebar on our keyboard, which will give us access to the hand tool, where we can now move our screen without deselecting or changing our tools. This is also useful. Now say if we wanted to go ahead and create some paths here, we can press and hold space on the keyboard, which will enable us to edit an anchor point. So again, if we click to create an anchor point here, so if we wanted to curve this here, if we press and hold the space bar, we can now move the anchor point, and now we can change our curve like so. Cool. Now with the direct selection tool, we can also go ahead and join two anchor points together. So if we select this anchor point here and this anchor point here, we can press Ctrl J on the keyboard to join these anchor points. If we select these two anchor points again and press Ctrl Alt and J, we can join and average simultaneously. So we can also have access to this average tool here as well. Cool. Now also one thing to bear in mind is the color of our highlighted paths and Bezier handles are dependent on the color of the layer that we're using. So let's go ahead and create a new layer and let's create a new shape. You'll see that the color of these shapes that we're using here are now colored as red because we're using the red layer here. And this is also the same if we create another layer. You'll see now that the color has turned into green if we're using the green layer. Cool, so let's go back to our blue layer here. Now the next thing that we want to have a look at is over here in the paths option. We have simplify and add anchor points. So if we go ahead and create a fairly complex shape like so, just to help illustrate these tools here. Now if we have this selected, take note of all the anchor points that we've got here. Go to Object, Path, and if we go ahead and click Add Anchor Points, you'll see that we've got more anchor points here, which can help us manipulate this shape further. Now if we wanted to simplify this shape, as if it was too complicated for us, we need to go to Object, Path, and Simplify, and now we can adjust our shape like so to simplify our line. Excellent. And another thing that you might find useful as well is when creating a handle like so, you can also press and hold the control button on your keyboard to independently stretch and shrink the leading handle, like so. Otherwise, if you try and stretch the handle, both handles will be moving. But if you press and hold the control button, you'll see that the leading handle is the only one that is moving. Cool. And now finally, before we end our tutorial, just a few best practice suggestions. So let's go ahead and create a new line. So when you're going to create a curved line, say like this, it's sometimes best to drag your handle at the beginning of your curved path instead of just clicking and then dragging like so. This will give you more options and a nicer, cleaner curve there when you're creating it. It's also best to create a handle at about 1/3 of the curve that you're creating for, just to create a nicer, curved, smooth path, like so. Also remember to be sparing with your use of anchor points. Fewer points equals a neater path. And then once you are familiar with using the pen tool in Adobe Illustrator, why not try out our pen tool exercise, which you'll find and download at the bottom of our comprehensive guide to the pen tool in Illustrator. And you can find these resources using the links in the description below. And then you can follow the guide to create precise paths using the hints and shortcuts covered in the article and in this video. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on Tuts Plus.